Make me sound a bit like kind of a jerk. It's been my lifelong goal to beat Labubu AI moments in subscriber count, and we're getting close, guys, so be sure to smash that subscribe button. Captain Samuel Sigils is a really underrated YouTube science fiction book review channel, and one of my favorite booktube channels in general. So when the channel's creator, Samuel Planck, decided to write a book, I knew that I had to read it. The Book of Deogenesis, which came out just like a week or two ago, is a post-apocalyptic science fiction book focused on themes of war, the cycle of violence, the healing power of nature, and military indoctrination. I don't usually go really deep in terms of authors on my channel, but I think this one really warranted it, not just because I consider him a friend, but because I think his history means so much. Also, this next thing is going to make me sound like a bit of a jerk, but I pride myself on my transparency, so I think it's good to share. When I first saw Sam's channel and I saw that it was sort of advertised in his description that he was ex-military, he was a machine gunner, a combat veteran, I was like, okay, dude, we got a big tough guy here. And that's a sentiment that I'm really embarrassed by after reading this book and also getting to know him a little bit better, because after reading the book, I see that this is more of an acceptance of his past and perhaps even a way to cope with his trauma of experience in combat zones rather than some sort of flauntatious remark. He writes in the afterword that, quote, "I was used in war and thrown away broken. To live again, I studied religion and spirituality to reconstruct the moral code that had been shattered by my participation in war. The Book of Deogenesis has been a creative, meaningful way for me to express these painful, profound life experiences." To me, this lends a lot more weight and credence to the message that he imparts on readers during the book, and I find it impressive that he was able to shape his negative experience into a very commendable message. Enough about the author. Let's get into the plot. So what is this book about? The book takes place on Aden, and the main species in the book are the Glim. The Glim are these synthetic, genderless, mass-produced slave creatures that are made for their masters, which are a group of 4 humans, including the Golden Goddess, a religious figure worshipped by all of the Glim. The slave creatures, they've got 2 phases in life. First, when they're young, they're tasked with pulling the golden spherical city where their masters live across the planet. And then as they age, they're forced to eat this radioactive waste that eventually will turn them into their second stage. When they eat enough of this waste, they sort of evolve physically, right? And they turn into their second stage, and they develop this combat ability. It could be like the ability to throw fire, launch needles, or even something like blinking time. And that second stage of the Glim are used as the city's killing machines in war. Importantly, all of the Glim are fitted with this sort of mind control helmet that can be used to force them to act and think in a certain way. The main character of the book is one of these Glim slaves, and it's born and it immediately joins the troops, immediately falling into line with others, pulling the Golden City across the planet and worshiping the Golden Goddess, as all the Glim do. We watch our main character develop as it undergoes the horrors of war and is moved to the point where it sort of dares to dream of a future not dominated by an endless cycle of violence. And that's pretty much it. It's a lot to describe in just like 30 seconds, but considering that there's not a whole lot more beyond that regarding like world building complexity, I think it's super digestible. Based on the plot that I've described and the author's history, I'm sure you've probably guessed already that the main message in this book is about war. Nearly every single thing in this book is an analogy for war, and I want to give a couple of examples. I love how he depicted the pipeline of feeling in debt to masters, and specifically how it leads into brainwashing. The Glim are literally manufactured by their masters, and so naturally they have this feeling of debt to those that created them. They gave them life. It's to the extent that many of the Glim, they blame themselves rather than ever even dare to fault their perfect creators and leaders. Quote, "The humans of the city, our viziers and Golden Goddess, are faultless. It is we who lacked faith and ability." It's not exactly the same with real-life military conscription, but it's damn close. Even in my own personal experience, the driving force for like everyone I knew that joined the military, it's almost always intense poverty. How can the military not sort of feel like saviors when you have nothing? You don't have access to money or education or even like basic living necessities, and they offer you a helping hand and a future. And naturally, with this feeling of your leaders being the ones that gave you life and purpose comes the brainwashing that can follow. The human masters can feed the Glim whatever propaganda that they want, even defining their worth as their ability to protect their faith and carry out their master's orders. The Glim completely have their sense of self ripped from them, even being shown in Planck's nomenclature. The Glim are all given numerical designations instead of names, and even the word Glim itself is both the singular and plural form to promote, quote, uniformity of thought. I also loved Sam's description of how the Glim were just so blatantly used. In the book, the Glim are promised by their golden goddess that, while they can't go to the golden city that they've been pulling during their lifetime, if they fight bravely for them, they'll be taken to the city with open arms when they die and given this peaceful, happy existence for all of eternity. And the leaders get away with this because that promise of hope for future salvation is all the Glim know. The Glim literally know nothing about the possibility of peace, and they see no other direction in life. So it's natural for them to see the pipeline of faithful warrior into happy afterlife as their only option. There's a million ways to make a metaphor with this, but an interesting one that I kind of took a lot out of was this metaphor for like an impoverished American conscript that has nothing, and they're promised a wife and a retirement fund and a white picket fence upon fulfilling their service. But obviously, the most obvious connection is to the warring sex like Sam saw in his service in Iraq. I also loved seeing Sam's realistic description of how breaking this cycle of violence is not something that everyone can realistically achieve, which is displayed very soberingly in the book. I could go on and on and on and on about his analogies that he uses in his book, but there's just way too many to touch on all of them in a review. A lot of the fun of the book was making these connections yourself and linking everything back to the real world. His commentary touches on all facets of war, including things like its propensity to be never-ending, the ideas of similarity between people on opposite sides, and even coping with and coming to terms with violence and hatred when you leave it. Overall, this book is so smoothly written and digestible. It includes a glossary, which I ended up reading first, but the terms are all introduced pretty much right at the get-go, so before like 15 pages in, I kind of had them all in like easy memory and I was cruising. The prose in general just felt super easy to read. The dialogue was clear, the action sequences were engaging, and even though the musing of the main character was written in this sort of like biblical diction, I never had an issue understanding it. Diction, did I use that word right? I don't know, I don't think so. Well, if you want someone with like really good vocab, just go watch Book Build. One suggestion I do have though is that some words were reused a lot, and there were also some sentence structures that were repeated a little too much in my opinion. But overall, I found this book velvety smooth to read. Even from the opening scene, the action was fun and exciting, and Sam never lingered too long on any one scene. I also really appreciate the consistency of the thematic messaging. Like I said earlier, like every single detail of the book is analogous to some sort of commentary on the real world, mostly surrounding war and violence. I did find the delivery of the messages to be just a tad heavy-handed, though. I think this is fine for what it is, which is a fast-flowing book, but it's definitely something to have the expectation for going into it. Like, okay, so there was this symbolism that I didn't pick up on until like 75% of the way through the book, and when it dawned on me, I felt so proud and I felt so satisfied as a reader, and I would have loved to just have that feeling of having to work to get a message a little bit more throughout the book. So anyway, I'd consider Sam an online friend, so I wasn't completely unbiased reviewing this, sue me, but I did thoroughly enjoy the book. Obviously, there's going to be little tendencies and little issues that didn't get this to a level of some of the greats, but it's a damn good book and it's got a really meaningful message. So that's all I'm going to say for my review, but feel free to stick around because I actually did an interview with Sam. So yeah, it was really fun. Check it out. Hello, everyone. If you're watching this video, you probably just saw my review of the book of Deogenesis. And look at this. I've got the author right here with me. Another great Sam. So, Sam, welcome to the channel. Probably first appearance of many if we end up collabing in the future. But yeah, welcome, dude.
Yeah, thanks for having me so much. And I love your channel. You know, it's got an insight and a humanity that I really appreciate.
Thanks, dude. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I love all the different settings and all the little adventures you get up to at the park or out in the woods and trees and stuff like that.
That's the benefit of filming it outside. I like how you've added a couple of extra stuff recently, like with your Ring camera footage. So that was fun. Everyone, just I'll leave a link to his channel in the description. Obviously, I'm a big fan. I definitely don't know what I'm doing, so if some of this is a little scuffed, sorry about that. But I also have like not many subscribers. Like you can't expect too crazy stuff. So let's just get right into it, though. I got a little icebreaker first. Okay, let's say you're dictator of the world, and don't worry about languages and stuff. You get to pick a single book, and every single person they turn 18, they have to read this book. What book would you decide?
Well, first of all, if I'm dictator of the world, I'm going to abdicate. And then the book that everybody I think would need to read would be Eric Fromm's Escape from Freedom. And this is a nonfiction book that talks about the psychological needs that don't get met, which drive people into authoritarian relationships. And so if my fellow human beings have set me up as a dictator, then I'm advocating, and they need to do some personal work and some soul searching to kind of reclaim their human autonomy and their freedom. And this is my copy that I had in Iraq, and it's got like all this filth on the side because cats would come up to the Humvee, stray cats, and I'd feed them part of my MRE. And one time I like dropped it into what the cats were eating on the floor and stuff like that. So this book's been on some adventures. But yeah, that's the book I would recommend if people foolishly set me up as dictator. I don't want that job.
Well, this is a positive dictatorship. I don't know, a weird future where somehow people are happy that this happened. Okay, let's move into the question. So I was wondering, did you have any specific authors or books that you took inspiration from for writing the book of Deogenesis?
Oh yeah, Michael Moorcock's work is typically referred to as the Eternal Champion. But the first book that he wrote when he was 17 was just called The Eternal Champion. So it gets a little confusing. But that first book that he wrote is about this human who's summoned to another world by other humans. And they say that there's this kind of dark elf race called the Eldrin who have come back. And they recruit him to lead their crusade to wipe out the Eldrin. And what I love about this book is he discovers that it's kind of the humans that are like the scumbags and the villains, and the Eldrin are actually like decent sentient beings. And he helps the humans anyway, and then when the Eldrin are losing the war, instead of the humans negotiating for surrender, they want to just enact genocide and totally wipe out the Eldrin. And the protagonist, Eric Hosey, says, no, I'm not doing that. Look, I won the war. I'm not going to participate in this genocide. And then they turn on him and treat their war hero like a villain and try to kill him. And there's this scene where he's trying to escape the palace and he leaps to the windowsill and yells, "Goodbye, Queen. You have lost your champion now." And then I like that because in my experiences of war, we're often taught as soldiers that there's good guys and bad guys, but in the real life, it's a lot more complicated. No side really has a monopoly on morality and ethics. Both sides, I think, would need to look at themselves and do things differently to be better people. And that book really points that out well in a fantasy setting. And also, as a veteran, I've often kind of felt that people have set me up to kind of be a hero when they needed me to fight, and then afterwards just kind of thrown me away. Yeah. Now, it's true that I get a lot of support as well from agencies and stuff like that, but in terms of like general society, people are kind of like, thanks for your service, go away. And I love that's, what they did to Eric Hosey in that Michael Moorcock book of, thanks for winning the war, please die now.
Yeah.
So I love that book by Michael Moorcock. It's probably my favorite book of all time.
How many times have you read it?
Just once. I like Michael Moorcock, but I find his stuff is a little too graphically violent for me.
Yeah.
So a little bit of him goes a long way for me, but still, that is my favorite book probably of all time, The Eternal Champion by Michael Moorcock.
All right, noted. All right, moving into the next one, talking about some motivation. What was your initial motivation for starting this book? When did, in your life, did you start being like, I want to write a book about this?
Well, kind of throughout my journey after getting out of the military, because of my conditioning to kill as a soldier and all of the traumatic things that I did in Iraq when I was there in 2005, I really had a lot of problems. I would really act out in aggressive, angry ways and get myself into trouble. And what was really painful was like I'd try to live as a good human being and get good stuff going for myself, and then I'd ruin it all with these aggressive outbursts. And I really had to spend a lot of my time working on myself, both in terms of my mental health and my spiritual growth, to kind of rebuild an ethical code for myself so that I wasn't acting out in these inappropriate ways. And when I would do those things, it was fine that, people would hold me accountable because I think, people are responsible for their actions. That includes me. But the response that I often got was like punishment, shame, ostracization, kind of being treated like a monster. And there wasn't really kind of this societal recognition of, well, we kind of did this to this person. Like we taught this person to kill and go in a war zone and to kill. And, it's fine if he wants to come back, but like, if he has any problems or any struggles, like that's not our problem. You know what I mean? And so as I started to behave myself and be a good person, I kind of felt like a kind hearted monster, basically. And I got this image of this fantasy of a like horrible monster creature as like the hero protagonist of a book, and like a beautiful woman with golden bells weaved into her hair as like this cold-hearted killer. Because yeah, we have this consensus reality that veterans are noble and war is noble and it's for a good cause, and that's kind of this surface beauty that everybody sees. But when you dig a little bit deeper, what we ask of veterans and our soldiers really damages them in some important ways. And it's kind of a monstrous thing to do, you know?
No, I hear you. Yeah, not something I have experience in, but it's super enlightening reading the book and seeing Eight go through that as well. And then I think even sort of the, not to go into spoilers, but to see how he sort of copes with that when he might come to some sort of realization. This is something that I was kind of curious while I was reading this. It sounds like to me, based on your inspiration for the book, I can probably take a guess of what your answer is going to be for this. But like, what kind of came first? Did you kind of have the world creation, or did you have like the idea of the themes that you wanted to portray in it, and then you're like, how can I best show this?
Well, it kind of grew out of my own observations of the world. So when I was in Iraq, I was a Humvee machine gunner that traveled around Baghdad. I was part of a convoy that escorted a one-star general all around. And I got to see a lot of action, and I would watch the two factions of Islam retaliate against each other back and forth. So one would car bomb the other, so then the other would retaliate with a sniper attack, and then the other would retaliate with like kidnappings and torturings. And so this world that's in the book is kind of, if you take that cycle of vengeance and violence and extend it down the road, that's how you get a planet that's been knocked out of orbit by a super weapon. And instead of people on the planet going, wow, like we really messed up, like maybe we need to change our ways, they're still just pointing the finger at each other and trying to annihilate each other, to the bitter end. And my message is that's not working for us, everybody. These cycles of violence and war are just not working for us. And this is the end result. And it just kind of goes hand in hand with that destroyed apocalyptic world. But I do want to say that this is a book of hope. This isn't a book that just leaves people hanging with a bunch of pessimism and nihilism. That's not what it's about.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I think that's like one thing that I really like about science fiction. You get to take things to their like logical or like theoretical extremes,
Yeah.
and you definitely did that. But I appreciate that, the hope that you get to see, and hopefully when people read this book, they'll appreciate that as well. Kind of taking a complete opposite direction. I think something that's super difficult in books is like when authors try to put in humor, and I think that it's even in like movies, like in my serious sci-fi movies, I don't want humor, or in my books, I don't want it. And I know it like just from watching your channel. I don't know. You have a lot of dry humor jokes and stuff like that. So clearly that's part of your personality. But like, what did you try to do going into the book? What was your mindset in terms of the humor? I thought specifically with like voodoo, which if you haven't read the book is this sort of pseudo sentient weapon that the main character uses. So what was your thought process using humor in the book?
Yeah, well, I am kind of a humorous guy. What's interesting about putting a book out there in the world is you get to hear the feedback that others share with you. And it's interesting because I hadn't really intended the sentient sword voodoo to be like comedic relief or anything. He and also the Vizier of Peace, kind of like the general of the humans, were kind of based off drill sergeants in real life, in that kind of like vulgar, loud, swaggering bravado personality kind of like the drill instructor from Full Metal Jacket. If that character came across as funny, it wasn't intentional, but that's okay. Because people read books and they have the experience that they have, and whatever experience they have is okay. I will say that the initial drafts of the book had way more pop culture references in it. Like I had a ton of references to like Schwarzenegger films, and I was like, okay, this is too much. Like I think this is going to break the immersion if I'm like referencing Predator and Conan the Barbarian, all that stuff. So there's still like those two are still in there, but they're very faint. They're very faint, and all the other pop culture references I just took right out because I just kind of felt it was like a distraction from the immersion.
Yeah, I'm probably not a good. I watch like no movies, so I probably wouldn't have understood any of that. But I can see how it would land with a lot of people.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think just about voodoo, like maybe humor isn't like the right word, but it was kind of wild to be like listening to Eight, who talks in this like very biblical way, you
yeah,
know, and then you hear like a one of the drill sergeants talking, or like voodoo who's kind of like, I don't know, kind of poking fun at him or like prods at him, versus Eight, who's like, he's like ties on, he's very straightforward, focused on his goal and the golden
yeah.
goddess. So yeah, I don't know, for me, that, I guess the word I describe for that is humor, but maybe like a different tone or something like that.
Yeah,
um
I feel you on the not watching movies thing because the only reason I know those movies is because when I was a kid, my dad would watch all the Schwarzenegger films, but as an adult, like I almost never watch movies. And I guess I was trying to make it so that the characters' dialogue was like distinct from one another, because I just find that when like everything is kind of the same in a book and nothing like stands out, it winds up like being boring or kind of vanilla. And so I based Voodoo the Sentient Sword on like the drill sergeants in my life, but the Golden Goddess and the way the Viziers and all the Garlems speak, I actually watched a couple hours of YouTube footage of far right evangelical preachers and the way that they talked and some of the phrases that they used, and kind of tweaked that a little bit to give them their dialogue.
I bet your YouTube recommended was crazy after watching those.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and then a lot of the made up language. First of all, I struggle with that because even though I had written down like how each made up word was spelled, I'd still like proofread and be like, "Oh, is that how I spelled that?" And then I've got like two different versions of the word running around that I'd like tracked down. But those were all taken from like ancient Hebrew words, and then I just gave them like wacky spellings to kind of show that like these were the descendants of religious fanatics that didn't follow the compassionate teachings that are found in scriptures, but just kind of like took on like the superficial trappings of it. There we go. Some pepper.
All right,
Nice.
I'll
Very nice.
I'll ask this next question with this dog here.
That's great. I
um,
love dogs, man.
which I'm taking care of. My roommate's out of the house, so taking care of her, and she's being a
Super
little bit loud.
cute.
So sorry if you guys hear Pepper in the background, but yeah. So my next question was just, what is, if you had kind of like a thesis for this book? If everyone that reads this book gets this one thing out of it, I'll be satisfied. What would that be?
Well, it's a number of messages and themes really, and you can't. They all kind of like hang together. You can't like pick just one. It's almost like asking like which is the most important ingredient in a cake. You kind of need them all, but probably the two that would stand out the most that kind of hang together is that, and we're going to get a bit woo woo here. Our reality within limits. Our reality is a direct manifestation of our beliefs and our actions. And so if the world is, full of war and suffering, that is a consequence of the choices that we're making as people. But the beauty there is that we can make different choices, right? So I'm a starship captain from the year 3485. We weren't fighting wars and blowing each other up, in 3485. So I know this can be done. I know this can be done. And it's kind of left open to interpretation to, does Eight, with his mutant powers, create this true golden goddess of compassion, or is he just the first individual that wakes up and says, enough is enough with the war, we got to stop this? And I kind of view that, as an opportunity for all of us to recognize we can't control what everybody else does. We can control like what we do. And, even if everybody else in the world is doing the wrong, destructive, violent thing, we can make a choice not to do that. All these heroes like Gandhi and Martin Luther King, they're just regular people like you and I. And, the way we live in the world matters. It really does. But the corollary to that is not to get too wrapped up in viewing the world in rigid ways and believing that we have the whole truth, or that we are doing the right thing, because the world is also full of people who honestly believe they're doing the right thing and they're doing good things, and they're making it just horrible for everybody else. So not get too attached to rigid views. And you know at the beginning of the book, eight believes that the Golem mutants are doing the right thing. They're just making matters worse. So it's about not being attached to views in a rigid kind of a way.
Dude, well said, because I don't know, that's something I try to like just generally go through life with, is like
Yeah,
nobody's out there trying to be an asshole. I don't know, like
yeah,
nobody's out there trying to make the world worse, really. Even like, politically, you think like people just think they're doing the right thing. They think they're making the
yeah,
world better. And I think if you go into life thinking that, it's, I don't know, it can
yeah,
provide some valuable perspective. So I think it's cool about, yeah, like,
yeah.
even
You
eight.
know, yeah, I feel you on that, because the problem with all these big, powerful people causing harm in the world is they don't know how to suffer. They don't know how to deal with the circumstances of their life that's been painful for them, and so they act out and they make it everybody worse for everyone else. And it really requires, some self reflection to be a decent human being in the world, because perhaps if some of these dictators of decades past, had just thought, wow, like this was awful. I went through World War I. This was so awful. Maybe I want to do something different so that never happens again. Two German soldiers. Hitler, makes all this awful suffering in the world, and Eric Marie Remarque writes All Quiet on the Western Front and the sequel, The Road Back. They both went through the same thing, and they both changed the world, one for the better, one for the worse. And we all have that opportunity, and that's kind of what this book is about. What kind of world do we want to create?
I don't know, dude. On a personal level, I have a lot of respect for you, because I think there's a lot of different directions you can take when you go through, I don't know, war. And I think it's really cool what you've decided to do with it, like even just with this book.
Yeah.
So I do have a question, kind of looking forward. I've always thought if I wrote a book, or even if I wrote like a short story, I would probably look at writing way different. So what is something that you see in books differently now that you've read some after you've written a book? What does it make you think about books differently?
Um, I think I really appreciate the modern computer, honestly, because the ability to like see what I've written and copy and paste different things around and have the help of like autocorrect and send it to friends so that they can proofread it for me really makes me appreciate what earlier writers that were just writing on like typewriters, or maybe with like actual, pencil and paper, went through, and that maybe I need to be a little bit easier when I review some of those earlier writers, because like once you type it on the typewriter, like there it is, like that's it. You can't just like rearrange all these paragraphs and stuff like that, like we can on a modern computer. So that's really helped me appreciate what we have today and be a little more understanding if some older works aren't as like polished as newer writing. Although I'm not a big modern books fan for various reasons. I know that sounds funny, even though like I'm a modern author. I just find that a lot of times, and with modern books, like people are just like writing to what's popular in the market, and then they kind of feel like more is more. So like if your book is longer, like it's like automatically better because there's more to it. But I'm of the opinion that like you should write if you have something to say and say it, and not like add all this fluff. And if you need 400 pages to say it, that's fine. And if you only need like 120 pages to say it, like that's totally cool too. Like you should just express yourself and not worry too much about chasing trends or trying to make your book this kind of bloated 7 volume expansive thing.
Yeah, so I don't know. I wonder how much of that is, publishers too, and like how much they want things to be. I don't know. I was just watching a book review and they were saying, "Oh, this was a short story," and then they were like forced to add on to it to
Yeah.
get a novel. So I don't know. That's, I guess that's a cool thing about just being able to self-publish, right? Like you don't care how
Yeah,
long it is.
that's so cool. I'm not like a big Amazon fan, but the fact that you can just take your manuscript and use a program to generate a template for the cover, and then just submit it. And then 72 hours later, they just kind of say yes or no, is amazing. And nobody like was having complaints with like the content of the book or the swear words. The only kickback I got was I didn't realize that my initial draft just had like a placeholder ISBN. So like, oh, your ISBN doesn't, it's just like made up. You got to come up with an actual one. But that was pretty much it. And that's a great feature. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people are using that to just churn out like AI slop, and it's out there. Like I was at the library today picking up books for my kids, and I'm like, this book looks interesting, and all the like characters in the book like are missing parts of their face or their like face is like melted, and I'm like, oh man, it's the AI slop. It's out there. That's what I actually put in my book. Like, there's no AI, used to create this book. Like, it was all me and my friend in the neighborhood, Jenny Sage, who did the beta reading for me, and she was also the artist. And she's a really cool person, and I love her art style. So I was pumped when she agreed to do some art for this book. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. No, you got to check those fingers, right? You got to see if it's not AI. They'll have like
Yeah.
6 or 7 fingers.
Yeah.
Um, so last question I have for you here. So now that you've written a book, are we gonna get 30 or 40 books from here on out, or what's your aspirations? You already got an idea for another one, or what's the plans?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm going to write as long as I have something to say. If there comes a point where I'm like, I don't really have anything to say, I'm just gonna stop because that's how you get like innumerable Star Wars prequels and spin-offs and all this stuff. It's like, come on, enough is enough. So I don't want to like do that to my audience, even if like, it would be nice. I don't expect it, but it'd be nice. Like if I became a famous author, I wouldn't want to do that to the people that really enjoyed my book and just like churn out, something just to pay the bills or something, just to make a buck. But because I had something to say, if I ever run out of things to say, I'll just, be quiet and let someone else say what they need to say. But for now, I do have a few more things I'd like to say in books. I want to continue to like explore various themes of my military and veteran experience. So what I'm working on now is it'll be 16 short stories, probably split up into 2 volumes of 8 and 8 stories called Tales of the MX-10. And they're going to be science fiction and fantasy stories that kind of explore all kinds of different themes. So for example, the story I'm working on now is called In Forgotten Fields, about how necromancy has overrun the earth and there's these Valkyrie that wear power armor and ride nuclear motorcycles, and they've taken a vow to stop undeath. So if people want to die, they go out and they free them from the necromancer's chains that kind of keep people living forever. But not all of the Valkyrie live up to that vow. And what are the ramifications of that? Or another story I want to write is called The Color Out of War, which is a little bit of a play on H.P. Lovecraft's The Color Out of Space, where a drug addicted evil sorcerer summons an orange meteor and tells his warriors that this is perfectly safe. And of course, it's not. And that's like a metaphor for Agent Orange and kind of all the ecological destruction that it's caused. So I've got, the 16 stories, written down as like notes for what I'd like each one to be. But it's kind of an organic process too. You might start to write and decide, this, story sucks. Or maybe that other story is, better than I thought. And then after that, I think I'd like to do something a little more lighthearted. I'll feel like I've kind of got, war and all this junk out of my system. We talked about it. And maybe try to figure out a way I can write some books that are more upbeat, because some of my favorite books of all time are actually the Bernstein Bears books, dude.
Nice. Yeah. Do you read those to your kids, or did you read them
Yeah,
growing up and stuff?
yeah, yep. I read them growing up. I read them with my kids. And if I could be anywhere, I would love to live in bear country. It's just this halcyon world where people love and respect each other. Work is valued. There's no war or serious problems, and everybody's just happy. I would love to be a bear in bear country and just ride my bicycle through the countryside all day. And it just sounds like a wonderful world that I want to live in. I think I'd like to play with that idea. Like, how could I write a book that's interesting to read, but is really upbeat and fun? And I think literature is kind of moving that direction anyway, with kind of the rise of like the cozy novels. I think with all the
Yeah,
crap going on in the
exactly.
world today, people are like, oh, bro, I don't need that, in my books. I just want to like read something that's, just chill and happy. And I totally get that.
Yeah, dude, I think we need a Berenstein Bears book review on the Captain Samuel Sigils channel at
Oh
some
yeah,
point.
one of these days I do want to cover them, because one of my favorite parts is authors and the illustrators didn't really know how to draw eyes well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so there's like all these like visual errors in the Bernstein Bears books that my kids and I like to look for. We call them googly eyes, where like they drew the eyes wrong. They're like looking different ways in these really extreme ways. And my kids and I love it. We're like, oh, we found another googly eyes, or just weird things like they forgot to put the spots on mama's dress and stuff like that. So one of these days, yeah, we need some Bernstein Bears on my channel for sure.
Awesome, dude.
Yeah.
Well, that is kind of the last that I had. So I just want to say big thank you for coming on the channel and for writing the book. I really did enjoy it. I mean, you'll see it when the review comes out. And yeah, dude, I'm excited for more content moving forward. Maybe we'll do a buddy read or something.
I love
That'd
that.
be
Yeah.
super fun. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well,
And but before you go, by the way, if you ever write a book, you've got a willing beta reader here, buddy, because I really appreciate your humanity and your thoughtfulness on your channel. And if writing was something that you're interested in doing, you totally can, because it's not like I've got a degree in creative writing or anything. I'm just a dude that decided that he wanted to write because it was supportive to me. So I just wrote a book and put it out there, and like you can totally do that. And I'd love to hear what you came up with if that's something you want to pursue. So.
dude, I would love to, but I just got to find a good thing to write about. Like you said, you got something to write about. You got something that you're interested in. I got to decide what that looks like for me. But
Sure,
I
fair
appreciate
enough.
it.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a process for sure. Yeah.
Well, to the viewers, feel free to check out Sam's channel. I'll put the link in the description. I love it. Check out the book of Deogenesis. Of
Yeah,
course, you
buddy.
can get it on Amazon. I will say it's like $10, and I got it. I got it on ebook too for like $3 or something like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's not like he's trying to rip you guys off. I'll tell you that.
Yeah,
So
I tried to price them cheap because I know I'm a new author and nobody knows who I am, and at the end of the day, like if I made a lot of money, that'd be cool, but that's not like the point. I just want people to like read my book and enjoy it because I get to read all this cool stuff other people have written, so I'm just trying to pay that forward and just put something out there that people can read, or maybe one day find on the bookshelf in like a used bookstore and be like, oh, what's this? Wow, neat.
nah, it's a good used bookstore pickup. It's got a cool cover, so I like
Yeah,
that. All
thanks,
right.
man.
Well, thanks again for coming on, and for everyone else, I'll see you next time. Thanks
Yeah,
for
thanks.
watching.
Yeah. Yep. Bye, Sam.
See ya.
Bye, Pepper. Thank you.
Bye.